Acoustics pioneer John Stuart Reid is a man on a mission to show the world how frequency and sound can be used as medicine. As the inventor of the Cymascope, John has transformed the invisible world of sound into breathtaking imagery, forever changing how we understand vibration and its role in life, health and consciousness. Through his pioneering research, John is helping us see and feel that sound is far more than what we hear. It's a living force with the power to heal, awaken and connect us to the very fabric of creation. Welcome, Mr. John Stuart Reid. It is so nice to have you here.
It's a great pleasure to be with you, Julia. I know we've tried for a while now to have this conversation, but here we are. So I'm very much looking forward.
It's all perfect timing in the grand scheme of things. So let's begin at the very beginning. I'd love to hear how you got on this path and your passion and your mission with what you're doing with sound and frequency.
I'd be very happy to share. So I've had two careers. The first career was that of an acoustics engineer. So I founded my own business a long, long time ago. And for 30 straight years, Julia, I was an acoustics engineer in my own business. It was, quite a good sized business, actually. But then towards the end of that period of time, I was certainly getting itchy. I knew that I wanted to do something different. And going way back to my youth, I had wanted to be a scientist, actually. That was, when my parents asked me, what do you want to be, John? Or Johnny, as they called me. And I said, I want to be a scientist. And it was actually my dad who, at that time, was a television engineer. In those days, do you remember? I mean, the TVs used to break down all the time. Anyway, he convinced me that it would be a great thing if I was to kind of follow in his footsteps, not specifically to be a television engineer, but just to learn all of the different types of electronic systems that a TV has. And the TVs used to have, let's say, not so, they're significantly different today. But nevertheless, I took his advice and I certainly did not regret it. I had a kind of an apprenticeship, you could say, in television. I then went into university and studied pure electronics. And then from that, I became an acoustics engineer and had this straight 30-year, time in my life where it was really standard acoustics, room acoustics and all of the equipment that goes with acoustics and so on. But towards the end of that time, that 30-year span, my daddy and I, we were both kind of amateur Egyptologists, we loved Egyptology. And we had been to Egypt several times up to this point where I'm going to describe, where just as tourists, just really enjoying Egypt. I mean, it's a fabulous country. Have you been, Julia?
Not yet.
Well,
Not yet.
put it on your bucket list because it's really a fabulous country to visit. And anyway, on this particular occasion, my daddy and I found ourselves in the Great Pyramid, in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid, which is an amazing, acoustically amazing chamber, all alone. And it was just sheer luck, basically. We hadn't planned it. It was just because I think we were late in the morning session. They have sessions in the morning and in the afternoon where you buy a ticket, and you have to go in at your allotted time and so on. Anyway, we went toward lunchtime and it was baking hot outside. And I think everybody had just, scarpered and gone off for their lunch. And here we were by ourselves in the King's Chamber. And I did something that I had always wanted to do, which was to lie in the sarcophagus, this box of granite, rose, pinky colored granite. And I wanted to lie in it because I knew that it had highly resonant properties. And so anyway, I lay in the sarcophagus, my dad just standing there observing. And I made a vocal glissando, a kind of unstepped enunciation of a single tone. And anyway, one particular vocal pitch, it felt like every cell in my body was tingling and goosebumps broke out all over my flesh. It was an amazing feeling, actually. And what I did, I'd never experienced anything like that in almost 30 years at that point of being in acoustics. So anyway, I played with that sweet spot, as I came to call it later, the Goldilocks zone. And, I took my vocal pitch just above that frequency, that pitch, and then just below it. And only at that exact pitch did this effect occur. At other pitches, it just disappeared. Anyway, this really got my attention, and I was very excited to look into all of this with acoustics instrumentation, to discover what was this special effect, and had the ancient Egyptians somehow contrived this, designed this into the sarcophagus. So that's the kind of backstory, if you like. And then fast forward to later that same year, and this was 1996. So early 96, we visited the pyramid. Later in 96, I managed to gain permission to carry out some acoustics experiments in the pyramid, which I did. And we could talk the whole of the podcast about those experiments. So we'll not go there. The one experiment that I wanted to conduct that I could not because of lack of time was a cymatics experiment. And so I gained permission to go back again, this time in 1997, to conduct the cymatics experiment. And it was a very strange event that occurred that turned out to be a great gift. And it was the fact that I quite badly injured my lower back about 3 weeks before going out to Egypt. I was really annoyed with myself, Julia, because, this was an important experiment and I had paid quite a lot of money to conduct it. So, I was annoyed that I had done this, bent down at an angle, picked something heavy up from the floor. And anyway, cut a long story short, I tried every which way to heal my lower back within the time period, and nothing worked. So here I was in Egypt, other people had carried the equipment, and I was now crawling in great pain into the Great Pyramid to conduct this cymatics experiment. And in brief, the experiment consists of stretching a membrane across the open top of the sarcophagus. And then, instead of me lying in the sarcophagus, to place a small speaker there. And so the speaker, connected to an electronic oscillator, would provide the sound, the tones, right? And then I would, to make visible the resonances in that 3.7 ton granite box, I would sprinkle on some sand, which we had, by the way, collected outside the pyramid because they've got any amount of sand in Egypt, obviously. Anyway, it was extremely painful, to set up this experiment. I had rehearsed it back in the UK, so I know exactly what I was doing. But nevertheless, it was very difficult, challenging. The antiquities inspector helped me to set it up. And so that was very kind of him. But now here he was standing up against the north wall, having set up this, helped me to set it up. He then went away, stayed in the chamber, keeping an eye on me. And then he stood against the north wall and he was filing his nails and he was looking across at me probably thinking this Englishman's a little bit, anyway, he's paid a lot of money and he's not doing any harm. So just let him get on with what he's doing. That was the kind of bored, expression on his face. Anyway, so then I switched on the oscillator and the whole chamber became filled with this very low frequency, about 50 hertz, throbbing, pulsating tone. Remembering that the whole chamber is very powerfully acoustic. So any sound you make in there really reverberates, around the chamber. But in this case, the sound was emitting from the sarcophagus itself. And what happened next was so astonishing that the antiquities inspector suddenly became very excited. And what happened was, here on this, having sprinkled sand on the membrane and switched on the oscillator, this low frequency, a beautiful ancient Egyptian hieroglyph appeared on the membrane. It's like Oh my goodness. I had not expected anything like that. I had expected, usually with cymatics, you get circular mandala-like figures. These are very symmetrical, usually geometric figures. But no, this was actually the backbone of the god Osiris. This was a, vertebra, very beautiful vertebra of the spine of a human being, basically. And in terms of the symbolism, it is the backbone of the god Osiris. It's the Jed pillar, D-J-E-D. And it wasn't static either, Julia. It was snaking. It was writhing, dynamic form. Oh my goodness, it was astonishing. And the antiquities inspector now rushed across, dropping his nail file as he went. How you do that? How you do that? He was really excited, and he was now engaged, and he wanted to help me. How can I help you? What can I do? And so we became a little team, and he would be scraping the sand off. I would sprinkle more sand on and, change the oscillator frequency, and a new hieroglyph appeared, and another one, and another one. It was an astonishing time in my life. And about 20 minutes into this experiment, fantastically successful experiment, suddenly I realized that there was no pain in my lower back. The pain had just completely vanished. And in that moment, Julia, I actually had this thought, which I still remember clearly to this day, even though it's, almost 30 years ago now. I had this thought, I know what's happening here. There are endorphins flowing in my bloodstream because I'm so excited, like who wouldn't be under these circumstances? And I thought the endorphins, these are natural opioids, endogenous opioids, will be masking the pain. And so when I get back to the hotel, the pain will come back, but it did not come back. So a real healing had happened in that moment. So there were two things that came out of that experiment that were life-changing. Obviously, the pain, the fact that the pain had vanished after 20 minutes of sound, when no amount of analgesic pills had hardly touched that pain. I'd been to a physiotherapist a couple of times, didn't help. So what was it about the sound that had suddenly, miraculously, seemingly banished this pain? And then the other thing was, the cymatics experiment had been so phenomenally successful. And by the way, I took photos. In those days, it was very early days of digital photography, and I decided not to take a digital camera because it was so low resolution. So I took a normal SLR camera, and the results were fabulous, really pin-sharp imagery and photographs. Anyway, so the other aspect to this was the cymatics experiment. And it said to me that if we can make visible ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs on an ancient Egyptian sarcophagus, what else can we do with this technology, this idea, this concept of making sound visible? And so those two aspects of that experiment were completely life-changing. I went back to the UK without any pain, right? And decided to sell my acoustics business and to then become the scientist that I had always wanted to be, as a young man. And that's exactly how my life became this. I came into this new aspect of my life, this new chapter of my life, as an acoustic physics scientist.
That would have been incredible. And do you think, like as you're speaking, I'm seeing, or I'm feeling, or getting a sense that the sound, obviously it's doing something to the blood, as we now know, oxygenating more, helping with inflammation, activating the vagus nerve and helping with that. And also, I believe, bringing you into alignment, like just everything into alignment. So there's more than one thing happening. There's a multitude of things happening when we use sound as medicine, which I would love you to talk more to, because there is such a need for that now. Well, two things. I'd love to know, with the Cymascope, I would love to learn more about what you're using that for, like what the applications are. And there's an app for that. which I think everyone would love to know about. And then let's talk about frequency in medicine and how it affects our blood and everything else that's involved there.
Sure, I'd love to share on those subjects, Julia. Well, I think the starting point has to be the blood research, because literally we are at a junction now where research that I began into human blood, the effects of music on human blood, actually, that research began in 2018. So that's 7 years ago. Certainly been very focused on human blood throughout that period. And it began with Professor Sung-Chul Ji of Rutgers University, who came here to support me in this work initially. And this was actually partly funded by greenmedinfo.com. If you know of them, they're probably the world's largest natural health website. And the guy behind that is Saya Ji, who is the son of Sung-Chul Ji, who's this professor from Rutgers University. Anyway, Sung-Chul came here. We worked for several days together, side by side in the lab here, developing this protocol to immerse blood, whole human blood, in music. And we were very successful throughout those few days. And then what happened was, towards the end of that period, after we had developed the protocol, we began experimenting initially with classical music, because we both thought that classical music would probably provide the best result with the blood. And we were proven completely wrong. And so what happened was we tested the blood with the classical music. So the blood, what happens is a really simple experiment. You get a test tube, little test tube of human blood, decanted into two smaller test tubes. One becomes the control experiment, and that goes into a small incubator in the Faraday cage in the lab here. We have a Faraday cage, which is very, very quiet in there because it's acoustically lined, but also it's electromagnetically screened. So that becomes a control. And then the other vial goes in a lab incubator, main body of the lab here, where we have a small speaker in that incubator. So now we can play music to that blood. And only for 20 minutes, Julia. This is the protocol, 20 minutes of immersion. Anyway, after we had performed the first experiments with classical music, the results were pretty good. We were getting like 10%, 12% increase in the viability of the red blood cells. This means the ratio of dead red blood cells to living red blood cells. This is the word viability. And so we knew that there was some mechanism at work. Obviously, the fact that we were seeing this increase of, say, 10% increase in viability, there was some mechanism, but we couldn't put our fingers on it really at the time. And then we decided to experiment with blood in the Cymascope instrument. And by the way, this is not the scientific model that you're seeing here behind me. This is actually the new portable model. It's called Cymascope Lite. It can be used for scientific work, but more than that, it's suitable for musicians, people that want to work with sound, in a live environment. But anyway, so we decided to work with human blood in the Cymascope instrument. Why? Because we recognized that the speaker in this incubator in the lab had a very kind of relatively poor bass response. And we thought, let's try it with lower frequencies. Let's try it, because we kind of had a suspicion that maybe it was the low frequency content that was causing this effect, this viability increase. And we knew that the Cymascope had a very, very good low frequency response, going way down to 3 hertz, right? So what we did was put whole human blood into the Cymascope instrument. We injected a tone into the blood. It was actually 44 hertz at the time. And what happened next was astonishing. A beautiful cymatic pattern appeared in the blood. Now, that in itself, Julia, was not surprising because blood is mainly water. And in the Cymascope instrument, we use water, pure water, as the revealing medium, right? So the fact that there was a cymatic pattern was not a surprise. It was beautiful. But then we then removed the tone, the pure 44 hertz tone from the blood. And the pattern remained in the blood, right? This doesn't happen with cymatics. You know, you inject sound into the water, say, a pattern will occur, beautiful pattern will be created in the water as the frequencies of the sound organize all those trillions of water molecules into beauty, into great beauty. That's the normal thing that happens with cymatics. It's a beautiful organizing principle. But in this case, it certainly did organize the blood. Then when we took the sound away, the pattern remained. And that was the big clue as to what was happening. Because what was happening, it turns out, was that the low frequencies in the sound, just as we had suspected, were causing the oxygen that's dissolved in the blood to bind to the hemoglobin molecules. And in that binding process, it causes the blood, which begins very dark red, it now changes it to bright scarlet. So it's a very bright red pattern that appears. And then because we remove the sound, but the hemoglobin is still holding on to its oxygen. And that's why the pattern remains. And so this was a really, really big clue as to why the sound, the music was actually healing the red blood cells. So let me just take a step back now and explain that when blood is received here from a blood bank, it's very dark red. And remember that it has been removed from a donor, blood donor, just the day before. And when that blood donor, we don't know the sex, it could have been a man or a woman, it doesn't matter. When they took their last breath, as it were, before the phlebotomist took the blood would be highly oxygenated. But now, when we receive it, it's very, very dark red. What happens is when the low frequencies in the music enter into the blood, they cause the oxygen to bind, the dissolved oxygen to bind to the hemoglobin and therefore create this bright scarlet color, right? The other thing you need to know is that when blood is removed from a blood donor, it will always contain millions and millions and millions of healthy red blood cells, many, many millions that are already dead, and in the body would just be mopped up, as the body systems do, but also many millions that are in a kind of transitory state, that neither living nor dead. They are still alive, actually, but, in the body, they would be quite soon dead. And this means that the outer membrane of the red blood cells starting to lose their integrity, starting to break up. And what happens within 20 minutes of music immersion, the outer membranes of those red blood cells are made new again. They're kind of beautifully regenerated or rejuvenated, you could say. And so this is how the automatic cell counter that we use now counts these old red blood cells as new again. And do you remember that story of the genie and the lamp? New lamps for old, new lamps for old. Well, with this technology, it's like new cells for old, So it's an amazing experiment and has huge implications for medical science.
So this experiment that you did with music, you could easily be doing that with your own voice, couldn't you? Because I've been involved with 4 tests that were done with live blood analysis, where they took live bloods, and then one experiment was with crystal bowls, another was with Tibetan gongs. The ones that I personally did were with vocal toning and the colour red and the note C. And then another one was with the note B. and the colour magenta. And every single test. Now, the first two we did for 20 minutes, but the second two with the chromotherapy and the vocal toning and the sound, so we had the note coming through the headphones, that was 7 minutes. And then we took live bloods afterwards, and the results were astonishing. Like beforehand, the blood cells were clumped, coined together, not a lot of space between them. Afterwards, they were all separated. It was like a flowing river. They looked rounder. So because a round cell is a healthy cell, it was phenomenal. And that was voice as well as crystal bowls and Tibetan gongs. But
well, there's a very good reason for this. There's a very good reason for this.
Yeah. Yes, talk to that.
Yeah. I'm so happy that you have conducted these experiments. I'd be really, very excited to see your results. We have just reached this point literally the last few days where we have completed our study on human blood, this 7-year-long study, and we have also used Tibetan bowls, by the way, and other types of instruments in our previous work, not in this particular study that we're about to publish. But we certainly know that Tibetan bowls and gongs and other forms of musical instrument do affect the blood in the same positive way that pure frequencies do and that music does as well. One of the mechanisms, well, there's two primary mechanisms. One is the oxygenation aspect, because let me explain that when you have a heartbeat, your heart is obviously one of its roles, primary role, you could say, is that of a pump. It has many roles in the body. But when the heart beats, that is actually a pulse of low frequency sound. If you think about it, you put your ear to the chest of someone or you use a stethoscope, you hear the boom, 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 right? These are pulses of low frequency sound. And in the same way that in our experiments in the lab here, we made this discovery that low frequency sound causes the oxygen to bind every time there's a pulse of low frequency sound, say from pop music, which was the discovery we made, that pop music is far more healing than classical music, which was so counterintuitive, right? But it is the low.
It was the bass beat, though, wasn't
it?
In the pop.
Is actually mimicking, Julia, what happens in your own vascular system. Your heart is a pump. Every time there's a heartbeat, that's a pulse of low frequency sound that causes the oxygen to bind to the hemoglobin. So one of the mechanisms in your experiments concerns the low frequency sound, say from your own vocalizations or from Tibetan bowls, say, that are penetrating into your vascular system and causing more oxygen to bind to the hemoglobin. So that's number one. But number two is something perhaps in your experimental results, which is maybe even more important, and that is something called piezo 1 channels. So you know about the piezoelectric effect. In this case, the word piezo is P-I-E-Z-O, and then a number 1 with no space, right, between the O and the 1, piezo 1. And what this is, these are little ion channels on the surface of red blood cells. And as their name suggests, they can be stimulated by vibration, by sound. And when that happens, there's an electrical opening of the piezo channel because of the sound, right? So I think in this case, what's been happening in your experiments, perhaps, is that the sounds that you were creating, whether vocally or with the Tibetan bowls or whatever other instruments you're using, was exciting the piezo channels of the red blood cells and causing them to be electrically more active. And this is why they are then separated from their other blood cells and flowing smoothly where they before were clumped together. And this is because of piezo 1 activation. And it's, almost certainly that is the mechanism that's causing that beautiful effect, which is a natural effect. Our bodies are almost entirely liquid crystal. Our blood is a form of liquid crystal. Our nervous system, they're all liquid crystals. This brings me to this amazing experiment that was conducted by the Niels Bohr Institute going back to, I think it was 2005, where they made an astonishing discovery that the primary role of nerves in our body is to conduct sound. The primary role of nerves is to conduct sound. And this goes way back in evolutionary terms, when nerves were evolved by nature. Nerves have a myelin sheath goes around them, and it kind of resembles a little bit like a coaxial cable, one inside the other. And the myelin sheath is responsible for this liquid crystal piezoelectric effect. What it basically means is that when sound enters into your nerves, that actually creates the electricity in your nerves that then travels to your brain, right, to be interpreted, as whatever the sense is. But isn't this astonishing, that this is the primary role of nerves? And so now if you think about your body, all over your body, you have thousands upon thousands of nociceptors. These are the free ends of nerve fibers just under the skin, and also throughout all of your organs, by the way, as well, internally. In fact, every thought that you have, Julia, begins as sound. The reason that I can say that with absolute confidence is because of the laws of physics, right? So in the neurons of your brain, obviously when you have a thought, there are whole patterns of neurons that are firing, right? But right down at the biochemical level, at the atomic level, all of the molecules in the neurons that are literally colliding with each other to create the firing effect, right? That is literally sound. So what it means is that every thought you have begins with sound in the brain. And by the way, it doesn't stay in the brain. It cascades throughout your whole organism because that's what sound does. It radiates. And the other amazing aspect to this is that every sound that's created in your body also then creates light. And the light that's created, in this case, almost all of it in the infrared or near-infrared spectrum, is modulated in amplitude by those sounds. So now you get the idea that every thought you have begins with sound, but then creates light, and that light radiates throughout your whole organism. And this is the reason, this is how your brain is connected to all the cells in your body, not through the nervous system in this case. Obviously, that's an important part of your physiology. But in order to send messages to the cells, most of the way that the cells communicate with the brain is in the infrared or near-infrared spectrum. So this is how literally your brain speaks to all your cells in the data that's in that near-infrared energy. It's an astonishing idea. And the other thing that comes out of this, Julia, which is perhaps even more exciting in a way, is that you know that your body is warm, right? Your body is warm because of all of these inelastic collisions that are happening at the atomic level, creating not only sound but also light that's in the near infrared and infrared spectrum that now radiates from your body, right? So anyone that comes close to you can feel your radiation, can feel your warmth. But that warmth isn't just steady state heat. It contains masses of data, which is all the brain to cell communications that are now radiating from your body, right? And this is something that really is only on the cusp of being investigated by science. everybody's just taken for granted that we are warm human beings, right? We have warmth, but without really even thinking that that warmth that's radiating from your body contains masses of data, all of the cell-to-cell communications between the brain and the cells of your body, which is an exciting thought, isn't it?
It's exciting because as you're speaking, I'm an empath. It's almost like you're explaining to me, this is how I'm picking up information from someone else.
Exactly.
Because when we're in their field, if their energy and the light and the sound is emitting data, and if you are someone that is of a negative mindset, then what you're radiating is that frequency of someone that is of, let's say, your kindness, love, compassion. It's something that is a natural state for you. That would be the frequency you're radiating. So when someone is near you, that's what they would be picking up on. Because what you're saying is it has data in it.
Exactly.
So for me, that's a light bulb moment of, now that makes so much sense, because sometimes I can get this download on what's going on for someone. And I've been working with people for more than 20 years now in this capacity. And I've never really quite understood how it all works. And I feel like what you've just said to me is like, and that's really how we communicate with each other without speaking, without using sound, because we can often hear thoughts. I know I can. So that is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, it is indeed. And, I'm not the only person to be talking about this. The Heart Math Institute are one of the organizations who are talking about this idea of the warmth of the body containing all of this data. But I'm sure you're right, Julia. This is why I get the same sort of feelings, when I'm meeting someone for the first time. I get an instant sense that I either really like this person or something about them that I don't like, and that is the resonance between all of the data in the infrared that they are radiating into my body and being picked up by my cells and my brain. And obviously there is a lack of resonance with some people, but with other people, immediate, I really like you. I haven't even spoken to you yet, but I really like you. And this is the almost certainly the mechanism at work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's talk about, have we spoken about sound waves? They're not really sound waves, are they? They're sound bubbles.
The sound bubbles. Yeah, this word wave is certainly a kind of, a misleading term, let's say, because it immediately conjures in the mind this idea that sound is leaving, say, our mouth as a wave. If you say to someone, what is the shape of sound? Almost certainly they'll say it's a wave. And then you will say to them, well, okay, show me that wave coming out of your mouth right now as you're speaking. And they will do something like this, a wiggle in the air, right? And this is so completely wrong. The shape of sound is indeed, the audible shape of sound is spherical. When I say audible, I mean that sound that we can hear as humans is always almost perfectly spherical. But as the frequency rises above human audibility, let's get up to, say, human audibility tails off at about 17,000. But, if we go up to now 20,000, 30,000, which a lot of birds sing in that area, by the way, we can hear bird song, but we can't hear the whole of their song. Many birds sing way up beyond our hearing. If you were to look at the space form of the energy leaving their syrinx and their beak, right, and going out into space, you would see that this bubble that I'm referring to is now flattened. It's very directional. And if you go even higher in frequency, up to what the frequencies that dolphins employ for their biosonar, this echolocation sense, they have frequencies up to about 150,000 hertz, right? And that beam of energy that leaves the dolphin is no longer like what leaves the bird, which is a kind of ovoid shape. Now it's gone really, really narrow, and it's now like a searchlight beam. It's very narrow. So the shape of sound changes with frequency, and all of the frequencies that humans can hear are creating sound bubbles that are almost perfectly spherical, leaving my mouth now. And as it leaves my mouth and a little bit out of my nose, it's pulsating in and out as it expands at the speed of sound, of course, right? The local speed of sound, whatever that is. And it's those modulations, those pulsations of the sound bubble, which if you were to graph them on an XY graph, you would see what looks like a wave. And this is where the confusion comes in to the minds of even many scientists are still talking about sound waves. And the same thing is true, by the way, of light. Light also, the word wave is used in relation to light. Again, these are not literally waves. Light propagates, almost all light propagates spherically. So if you look at a rainbow, for example, you're seeing only part of the sphere of light. There are certain instances where I've seen with my own eyes, if you look down, if you're standing above a waterfall and you're looking down into the water spray and there's sunlight at a particular angle, you will see a perfectly circular, it's actually spherical rainbow, but all you're seeing is a kind of slice through the sphere, but it is nevertheless a circular rainbow. And this is a proof, basically, of the principle that light is also a spherical emanation, excepting laser light, which is unnatural, right? But all, natural light is spherical in its base form. So, and it's, in terms of the Cymascope instrument, this is really important to know, because what you're seeing when you see a cymaglyph, which is the word that I coined simply to mean sound image, when you see a cymaglyph, it is literally a cross-section through the sound bubble. That's what it is. That's what you're looking at. But that energy pattern goes throughout the whole of the bubble as it's expanding. And then what we see with the Cymascope is this, this cross-section, which brings us to the point of the Cymascope app, by the way, which we've only just launched it. And here it is on an iPhone. And as I'm speaking now, what's happening is the app is got what's called a fast Fourier transform analyzer in it, and it's picking up my voice frequencies and showing us those in visible form as cymaglyphs, as you see, changing. And as they're changing, so you see that you actually you're being told the note as well. The note shows you which musical note. It's a fabulous app. And, one of the really exciting aspects to this app, Julia, is this little button here. This one here, this is a burger bar. If you tap that burger bar, you go into an area which is a repository of knowledge in the field of frequency medicine and cymatics. And that we can build that repository over time, because all of the articles are held on a remote server. So we can keep building them. So every time you open your app, well, not every time, but sometimes you will find a new article has been added,
Yep. Yep. So it's a living library. It's a living library.
Living library, exactly. So we're very excited about it.
So, when I first heard about your app quite a few years ago, the older version, I really wanted to create a film clip with our music, like one of our high vibrational songs. And my question to you is, because I would love to do this, is there an enhanced benefit when you're looking at the Cymascope, when you're looking at these images, is there an enhanced benefit with that, like through the eyes, and can that affect the pineal gland?
Oh, wow, yes. Well, yes, the
Big
answer is yes.
question.
The answer is
Okay.
yes. The first thing, to describe here is that cymaglyphs are true mathematical models, let's say, of a given sound. This is because the instrument is calibrated. So when you inject sound into the water of the instrument, what you see is an accurate analog or model of that sound. That means that the geometry is literally a mathematically related model to the original sound frequencies, whatever they are, right? Now, what this means is that from a perspective of either dynamic imagery that you would get from the Cymascope app, or even from a still image, because with the Cymascope app, you can press a button at any moment and get a still photo, and then save that photo to your photo library of your iPhone or Android phone, right? You can save it to the library. Now, let's say, just for argument's sake, that we print out a hard copy of that image, of that moment in time. What you're now looking at in that printed image is a geometric model of the original sound, whatever it was. Now, let's say in this case, we're going to choose a particular musical note that I'm going to talk about as E3 on the piano. That's the third octave of E, right? E3. Yep. And the frequency is ballpark 165 hertz. There are a few digits after the 165, but for easy talking, let's say 165 hertz, right? So let's say that you have tapped on your iPhone, right, to capture the E3 image in, say, 440 tuning, because by the way, the app also has 432 tuning as well built into it. But let's say you've done it in 440, and now we have a hard copy photograph printed out from your desktop printer, and we now put that on our wall, say, in front of our, in our home or office, and now we are gazing at that image of E3 from the Cymascope app. Now, what's going to happen? First of all, let's say in all light, there's always an infrared component. Doesn't matter what light it is, whether it's from an incandescent source, natural sunlight, even LEDs, they all have some component of infrared light in them, right? So when that infrared component of light illuminates the E3 pattern, the cymaglyph, and reflects back to you, that energy, that infrared energy, is going to penetrate deeply into particularly the near infrared component, deeply into your tissues, where it is received in the language of cells. Cells communicate in the near infrared spectrum. So the energy from this cymaglyph is going to literally be speaking directly to your cells, right? I get goosebumps even just thinking about that,
I want a picture of it right now. And we'll get a picture to put up, because
the other exciting aspect is, you mentioned the pineal gland, right? Well, in the last 30 years almost of working in cymatics, I've made many discoveries. One of them concerns what I'm referring to as the postulated laws of cymatics. And the second law of cymatics talks about the compression ratio between, we have to use this term wavelength because there's no other term in the English language that we can use, but the wavelength of sound in air as it enters into water changes. The reason it dramatically changes, is because the particles in the air, we're talking about, air is a mixture of gases. We have obviously oxygen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide in small quantities, and so on. All of those different gases are the medium through which sound is obviously conveyed. But, you have to know that the particles of air, these different, molecules, are a certain distance apart. They're not really close to each other. They're quite a distance apart. And this is actually determines the speed of sound propagation through air depending on altitude, because obviously at different altitudes, the density of the air, how close the molecules are together changes, of course. That changes the speed of propagation. But now think about the air, any sound in air entering into water. Now, the molecules of water are much, much closer together. And it turns out from the second law of cymatics that they are closer together by a factor of 829 to 1. So any sound, in this case, let's talk about 165 hertz, E3, that enters into water is automatically compressed in that ratio 1, E3, and to 829. In other words, compressed way, 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 way down. And it just so happens that E3 is a direct fit for the pineal gland, right? It's a direct fit in terms of the size of the pineal gland equals the wavelength of E3 when it's compressed down by that ratio. Now, think about your eyes as being filled with water. It's almost pure water. There's a little tiny bit of protein content in there, but almost pure water, right? And so this E3, when you make E3, however you make it, from any instrument at all, will automatically go straight through the eyes, which are almost pure water, and in the process of going through the eyes, automatically be compressed down in that 829 to 1 ratio, and then it goes straight through this sound goes straight through the optic nerve, which is made primarily, it's a liquid crystal, which is primarily made of water, straight through the optic nerves, which are also a liquid crystal and primarily made of water, right? Conducted all the way through into the hypothalamus, which is directly connected to the pineal gland. So now you get the idea. The sound that enters in through the eyes resonates immediately. That frequency resonates with the pineal gland. And this is why the pineal gland, which many people throughout history believed is our spiritual connection to source, why that particular frequency can actually assist our spiritual connection with source.
It really highlights the importance of our environment and what we surround ourselves with. I've known that for a long time, just being a professional musician and not enjoying singing certain songs or certain music and how that would affect me and make me feel. And with the way, like even our environment, like at the moment I'm out in the middle of the country, there is so much beautiful natural sounds, and just standing in amongst that today, I could feel myself just relaxing open. It was almost like the sound itself was relaxing open my sound. And let's talk about now how important it is to have really good sound, good quality sound. But I wanted you to touch on the heterodyne frequencies, because this is cutting edge stuff for healing, and it's so important for anyone that's really conscious and wants to heal themselves naturally using sound. Knowing what to do here is brilliant. So let's talk about...
I'd be delighted to share on this subject because I'm very passionate about it. You were just talking there, Julia, about the sounds of nature, how beautiful they are. I want you now to think about your ears, your outer ears, which, technically called the pinna or the auricle, the outer ear. And think of that ear, think of those ears as mini parabolic dishes. They're kind of collecting sound from the environment In fact, if you do that, you will collect more sound, won't you? Because your hands then also start to bring in a little bit more sound. But it turns out that nature's so clever, and nature has achieved something miraculous here, which is to use the pinna of the ears for two distinct mechanisms. The first is to collect sound from the environment so that the human, in this case, is able to sense the environment through sound. And that is a very important sense. We can, if danger is coming, we can hear that danger coming. So it's very important for survival and for communication and so on. But it turns out that nature did something really clever as well with the pinna of the ear, which is to take the vagus nerve, which leaves the brainstem, and takes it straight to the pinna of the ears. And this is why when you touch your ears, with your fingertips, oh my goodness, it is so exquisitely sensitive, just very, very lightly. The lighter you touch, the more thrilling it is. The feeling is so thrilling. In fact, the ears, as you know, are known as an erogenous zone, and this is why, they are so incredibly sensitive. The reason that nature did that is nothing to do with your hearing. The vagus nerve is a crucial nerve system in the body, but it's not connected to your hearing system. So why did nature decide, or at some point, arrange for the vagus nerve to go to the left and right pinnas of your ears? The answer is to improve vagal tone, because vagal tone, it's like tuning up your nervous system. To improve vagal tone is very, very important for a human being. And the way that nature has arranged it is that the sounds of the environment do that automatically for you. So all those beautiful sounds that you're referring to, Julia, are being collected by your mini parabolic dishes here and going straight down. The energy is going straight down into your vagus nerve system. Now, there are various aspects to the vagus nerve that I need to describe. First, from the pinna of the ears, by the way, most of the nerve endings go into the tragus, this little flap of tissue that overhangs your auditory canal. On the inside of there is where most of the nerve endings from the vagus nerve terminate, but they actually spread across the whole of the pinna as well. Anyway, in addition to that, from the vagus nerve, from the pinna, the vagus nerve then goes to the pharynx and the larynx. And this is very good news too, because as you were saying, very early on in our chat today, that when you make your own vocal sound, it has many healing qualities. And perhaps the most important of those is that it stimulates the vagus nerve system. So even now when we are chatting with each other, we are helping to tone up our vagus nerve system. And people who sing, who love to sing, they're getting a really good tune-up of their vagus nerve system. Nature arranged it this way deliberately. And then from the pharynx and the larynx, the vagus nerve then goes to the lungs, to the heart, to the liver, to the kidneys, to the gut, and all of the major organs in the body. And this is why, if someone is unlucky enough to have their spinal cord severed in an accident, they can still go on living because of the vagus nerve, because without that vagus nerve, they would die, right? But the vagus nerve keeps all of these autonomic functions of the body going, right? So now let's talk about the discovery that I made and why it's important. I had been reading a lot of research about the vagus nerve from many different research groups around the world, medical research groups. And one of the discoveries that have been made, which has now been verified by many different groups, is that to optimally stimulate the vagus nerve system requires very low frequencies, 5 to 10 hertz. Now, in nature, 5 to 10 hertz is for sure created by ocean waves, action on the seashore, white noise from ocean waves, yes. White noise from the wind in the trees, that wonderful word cyrism, which means the wind in the trees. Yes, very, very low frequencies are created that way. White water rivers, same. Any busy river has a whole spectrum of sound frequencies going way down to low frequencies, 5 to 10 hertz. Waterfalls, any of those sounds of nature create these very, very low frequencies. So that's, how nature came, I suppose, to require these particular very low frequencies for optimal stimulation. Not to say that the vagus nerve is not stimulated by other higher frequencies. It is. We talked earlier about Tibetan bowls, gongs, other forms of musical instrument, all support vagal stimulation to some degree. But if we want to do it optimally, apparently, we have to use these very, very low frequencies, right? Well, this is my little introduction to vagal heterodyne discovery. This particular day, having read all of this science, I thought, we have some dear friends in musicians Anders Holt and Kachina Miado. They're a couple, and they make beautiful music. Anders is a gorgeous vocalist, and Kachina an expert pianist, and together they make this heavenly music. And they had made an album. They've got an album called The Dream of the Blue Whale. And Annalise and I, we love that music. We often play it at breakfast time. It's so soothing. And this particular day, I thought, I wonder what frequencies are in Anders' voice, and I knew that the lowest frequency that a human male can make is, on a good day, is about 60 hertz, typically more like 80 hertz, but 60 potentially. And so I looked at their album on a spectrum analyzer in the lab here, and boy, did I get a surprise, because the lowest band on the analyzer, which is the 12 hertz band, was merrily dancing up and down like this with Anders' voice. And then when Kachina, there were times when Anders stopped singing and Kachina's keyboards carry on. And still, there's the 12 hertz band merrily dancing up and down, right? Well, I knew that the shape of the filter curve in this analyzer is a bit like a bell jar. It's shaped like that. And what this means is that when you see the 12 hertz band dance up and down, it means that there are frequencies present down to 4 and 5 hertz, right? So I got really excited this day to see this, and I couldn't figure out how it could be possible because, this is a CD, by the way. It doesn't matter whether it's a CD or a digital media file. The result is the same, basically. But in this case, it was a CD. But I knew that in recording studios, all the frequencies below 20 hertz are rolled off automatically. Well, not automatically, at the press of a button. Why? Because speaker systems cannot handle these very, very low frequencies and just causes the speaker cone to kind of flap about, right? So they're not there. So these frequencies I'm talking about are not on the CD, right? This is the important thing to know. They are being created in real time as the CD plays or as the digital media file plays. These new frequencies are created by what's termed the audio heterodyne effect. This is the mixing of frequencies to create new frequencies. And it's part of nature. It's a natural aspect of nature. But nevertheless, I've discovered on that day that only certain albums have this effect. Many albums do not have it.
Yeah, did you find an answer to that? Because I had an intuition on that.
You did?
I did, because I wondered if it was to do with conscious intention and heart intention. So the people that were really open-hearted and were creating the music from that space, whether it carried something different, like a different magnetism or different frequency that helped to expand it, or I don't know. Don't know the
Well,
scientific terms, but that was my intuition.
thank you for sharing that. The answer right now is I just don't know. You know, it's a delicious puzzle which I will figure out at some point. But in the meantime, what I've done is to create a list, my audio heterodyne healing album list, which I'll be happy to share with you and all of your followers. But the key thing here is obviously first you must choose an album from this list because only these albums have this effect. All the other albums, there might be many more yet that I haven't tested, obviously, but these albums for sure do contain this effect. Now, the next thing you need to know is that you must listen to this music only through good quality headphones that have a frequency response that starts at 5 hertz, published frequency response. The vast majority of headphones on the market have a published frequency response that starts at 20 hertz. No good. Well, you would still get some benefit, but not optimal. And the reason, why do we want optimal stimulation? Well, the good news here is because, again, referring to medical researchers, they have discovered many benefits of optimal vagus nerve stimulation, the most important of which is banishment of chronic inflammation. Think about this. Chronic inflammation is a precursor to cancer. Many people suffer from chronic inflammation and the pain that goes with it very often, right? And yet, there is nothing in the mainstream medical toolbox, if you like, that can fix that problem, that can cure chronic inflammation. Yes, there are some steroids and other substances which can give a short-term effect, but actually steroids are not good in the long term for a body. They have all sorts of negative side effects, right? Like all drugs do, right? Nothing that mainstream medicine can do. And yet, here's a discovery made by many medical researchers that chronic inflammation can be banished, can be gradually mitigated. Let's say it doesn't happen instantly. It takes a little while. You have to listen to good quality music, perhaps for a few weeks if you have chronic inflammation, before the cytokines that are in it's medically termed a cytokine storm in your bloodstream, they get calmed down and there's a return to homeostasis and the body just relaxes back into its normal rhythms. This takes a little time, but here's a way to do it. And it's not an unpleasant thing. It's actually a beautiful thing to listen to beautiful music through good quality headphones that have this frequency response, 5 hertz and upwards, right?
And so that's increasing the oxygen intake because of the effect of the sound on the blood.
Only a little tiny bit, I have to say, unfortunately, in this case. The ideal scenario, if we're talking now in a medical setting, if we want to do this in a medical setting, like a hospital, say, or a clinic of some kind, what we would be doing, what we'd be giving the patient is simultaneous, the same music from the album through the headphones and through a speaker system or through a vibroacoustic bed, so that the bloodstream, the whole vascular system of the body, is receiving these same frequencies, right? Particularly if you think of a bed that has tactile transducers in it, literally embedded into the mattress or the bed frame, tactile transducers can happily go down to 5 hertz, no problem at all, right? And so here you've got a supine patient lying there, receiving these beautiful vibrations coming up through their vascular system, while simultaneously receiving the beautiful music through the headphones. So that the headphone aspect is giving the vagus nerve system a really beautiful tune-up, and simultaneously the vascular system is receiving the benefit of extra oxygen. And oxygen, of course, is the key healing molecule in the body. So it's a win-win. It's a beautiful scenario. And that's what I'm envisaging, prophesizing actually will happen eventually in medicine. But, there's a very long time span between evidence and practice in medicine. And I learned not long ago, actually,
Sadly.
sadly that it's about 17 years it takes before evidence becomes practice in medicine.
Well, let's hope that's speeding up. So
Let's
just to go, the because I've got a beautiful friend whose son was in a car accident and he's still in hospital, and they don't have beds that they can put audio through. But just even having high quality headphones with this music that you're talking about, that will definitely help to reduce inflammation through the vagal nerve activation. Yes.
It will do that. And there are other aspects to this as well. You know, vagal stimulation can, it's been shown to hugely help cancer prognosis. I mean, I'm talking now about, according to the research, 50%, 50% increase in cancer prognosis if you have optimal vagal stimulation. It also slows the rate at which you age, which I think everyone is interested in that.
Well,
And there are many,
that's got to be to do with the telomeres. That's got to be to do
yes,
with
absolutely. So
yeah,
so many wonderful
the same
benefits
as
come
singing. Yeah,
so many
yeah,
wonderful benefits come from vagal stimulation.
yeah. I believe the voice is our God-given healing tool because it's
Absolutely.
with you 24/7. You can be singing, speaking, whatever it is, and also having the positive psychology, which is what we've done with the music. We've woven life affirming lyrics through all the songs and designed them to be uplifting and like short. So they're just little mantras that are easy for the brain to grab onto because of what you were talking about before. When we sing, the brain automatically produces those feel-good chemicals. So you've got the dopamine, the oxytocin, the serotonin, the endorphins. But what they discovered was, which I'm sure you know, this chemical cocktail helps to consolidate the new neuronal pathway by putting the sheath, by helping to consolidate the sheath around the pathway more quickly. And in as little as 21 days, you can consolidate a permanent pathway in the brain by just singing with conscious intention every day. But that's 21 days. You can be remapping your brain through your
Abs-
own sound and your heart and focused intention. And we truly have what it takes to heal ourselves.
We
And
do.
with people like you that are on a mission, like I have been, to bring forth your discoveries to help people. So share with us, how can people find you? You've got a new course, a new program happening in December. You've got the Cymascope app. So let's share your exciting stuff so people know about that and where they can
Thank
find
you,
you. And I'll
Julia.
have it in the show notes.
So I've been teaching now several years on the Shift Network. I've just completed an advanced course in frequency medicine, which was a 12-module course. But there's a new course beginning this coming December. So we're not far away from a new foundational course, when that'll be a seven-module course. And you can contact, you can make connection with me through our websites. We have two websites, cymascope.com, that's CYMA, scope like microscope, cymascope.com, and soundmadevisible.com. Yeah. And yeah, it's the Sound Made Visible. It's our little shop basically where we sell, well, certainly you can link to the app through the shop, but also we sell many products, cymatic related products, which help support, this is the way that we bring in revenue to support the research. Basically, we are self-funded. So the shop is very important to us. And you can connect with me through either of those shops, either the shop or the cymascope.com. And and if you are interested in frequency medicine, I certainly would urge you to consider taking this new foundational course, which is coming in December, because it is a superb course, actually.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. It's been absolutely amazing. Your knowledge is incredible. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we finish off?
Well, there's one aspect that we didn't touch on, many aspects actually, but one that I think is important to share, because you've been talking about the power of music and healing and so on in relation to all these beautiful hormones that are created whenever we are experiencing the great beauty of music, because beauty brings us joy. And when we are in joy, our body rewards us with all of these beautiful hormones that give us feelings of euphoria and just happiness, basically. But one of the aspects you mentioned dopamine and serotonin. Dopamine, when dopamine is created in the brain and enteric nervous system, it floods into our bloodstream, and the result of that is a proliferation of white blood cells. So we get a huge boost of our immune system whenever we listen to beautiful music, or whenever we are in joy, let's say, whatever it is, that whatever activity brings us that joy. It can be music, of course, but any activity that gives us joy, we are rewarded by nature. And isn't that wonderful? Anyway, just to round off, I really enjoyed our conversation, Julia, and I hope that it's helped fill in some dots for you, and perhaps for all of your, or some of your viewers and followers. And if anyone is interested in learning more about cymatics, then you can't do better than the Cymascope website, CYMA, scope, like microscope, cymascope.com. And then also our shop, soundmadevisible.com, which is how we support our research through sales of cymatic products and DNA voice signatures and many other wonderful products. So thank you so much, Julia, for this opportunity to share some of my research with you and with your followers. It's been a great joy for me.
You're so welcome. Before I let you go though, you just mentioned DNA signatures.
Yeah,
So is that
DNA voice signature is one of our favorite products, in terms of it's popular, I should say, really. And people can send in their voice file, and we make it visible with the Cymascope instrument, and we also colorize it to their particular choice of colors. We all have a particular
beautiful?
choice of colors. So DNA voice signature, because your voice is indeed, a function of your DNA. We all have our own unique voice. And when that's made visible with the Cymascope, well, you will see no two DNA voice signatures are ever the same. They're always different, and always very, very beautiful as well, by the way, because we all have great beauty in our voice frequencies.
Absolutely. And is this able to measure whether there's frequencies missing from a voice?
Yes, you can. We could talk about that another time, and it would be a very
Because
interesting.
that's a diagnosis tool too.
It is.
Often
It
if
is
there's a
indeed.
frequency missing, then it can determine that there's something not quite aligned or quite right on the physical. So I'm
Absolutely.
very interested in that. That's another conversation. And
Another
also a
conversation.
conversation about creating a film clip. I would love to create a film clip with your Cymascope. So we need to talk about that, because that's been something I've been thinking about for a couple of years since learning about your work. And I think it would be just amazing to create this visual beauty that is affecting us on such a deep level in so many ways.
It is. It's
So
not. If you look at the Cymascope YouTube channel, for example, there's a beautiful video on there called "The Power of One Tone," and it's actually the music of Anders Holt and Kachina Miado that I mentioned earlier, made visible with the Cymascope. And when you look at the beauty, the great beauty in that imagery, and you realize that every cell in your body that has a membrane, of course, they all have membranes, they're all receiving that great beauty. And this is one of the many mechanisms, and such a complex system, but one of the many mechanisms by which music heals the body.
harmonizing, electrifying, strengthening, helping the body to become, homeostasis and healing, really helping us to be balanced.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much. Yeah, I look forward to speaking to you again very soon.
It's been a great pleasure, Julia. Many thanks for sharing this knowledge into the world. Bye-bye.
You're
Many
so welcome. Bye.